The dust-laden air of Montana Territory shimmered in the late afternoon heat as Hannah Greenfield clutched the worn letter in her trembling hands. The stagecoach had been traveling for days, winding through landscapes so vast and untamed that they stole her breath away. Now, as the driver called out their arrival in Silver Creek, her stomach twisted with a mixture of fear and anticipation. This was at the moment she would meet the man she had agreed to marry, a stranger whose words on paper had given her hope for a new beginning in the West. It was 1875, and at 22, Hannah had left behind everything she knew in Boston. After her parents' deaths from influenza and the subsequent loss of their millinery shop to debtors, she had found herself with nothing but a small trunk of possessions and a spirit too proud to accept charity from distant relatives who had never approved of her father's marriage to her mother. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like providence. Hard-working rancher seeks respectable woman for marriage, must be kind-hearted and willing to embrace life on the frontier. Comfortable home provided. Hannah had exchanged letters with William Blackett for 3 months before agreeing to come west. His words had been thoughtful, honest, and devoid of flowery sentiments, qualities she respected. Silver Creek Station, end of the line for today, the driver shouted, breaking into her thoughts. Hannah smoothed her travel-worn blue dress and gathered her courage. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, sending dust swirling through the open windows. The driver opened the door, and Hannah stepped carefully onto the wooden platform of what appeared to be the main street of a small but bustling frontier town. Her eyes scanned the faces of those waiting near the station. William had described himself as tall with sandy hair and a mustache, but there were several men who fit that description milling about. She clutched her small handbag tighter, wondering if perhaps he had changed his mind and wouldn't come to meet her after all. Miss Greenfield. The voice came from behind her, causing Hannah to turn abruptly. The man standing before her was indeed tall, with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. His sandy hair was longer than she had imagined, and his mustache neatly trimmed. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a clear, steady blue that studied her with equal parts curiosity and caution. "Mr. Blackett?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He nodded, removing his hat. "Welcome to Silver Creek. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." "It was long but enlightening," Hannah replied honestly. "I've never seen country so wild and beautiful." Something in his expression softened slightly. "It grows on you, gets in your blood." He gestured toward a wagon parked nearby. "My ranch is about 5 miles outside town. We should get going if we want to make it before dark." Hannah nodded, suddenly conscious of how this moment must appear to onlookers, a mail-order bride meeting her future husband for the first time. She squared her shoulders. "My trunk already loaded it," William interrupted, offering his arm somewhat stiffly. "The station master pointed you out when you arrived." As they walked to the wagon, Hannah was acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople. William helped her onto the seat with careful hands, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. "I should tell you," he began as the wagon lurched forward, "life at the ranch is simple. Hard work from sunup to sundown. It's not what you might be used to in Boston." Hannah looked at his profile, noting the tight line of his jaw. "Mr. Blackett, I wouldn't have come if I expected an easy life. My father was a merchant, but I'm no stranger to work." He glanced at her, surprise flickering across his features before he turned his attention back to the road. "Good, that's good." The uncomfortable silence that followed stretched as they left the town behind and entered open country. Hannah found herself studying the landscape, rolling hills covered with tall grasses that swayed in the breeze, stands of cottonwoods marking the course of a distant creek, and mountains rising blue and mysterious on the horizon. "It's beautiful," she murmured. William nodded. "Best cattle country in the territory. I have 160 acres and grazing rights to twice that. Started with nothing 6 years ago." There was pride in his voice, and Hannah found herself warming to it. "That's impressive. You must have worked very hard." "Had no choice," he said simply. As they crested a small rise, a valley opened before them. Hannah could make out a cabin nestled against a backdrop of pine trees with several outbuildings and corrals. Smoke rose from the chimney and she could see horses in a nearby pasture. "That's it," William said. "Blackett Ranch." As they drew closer, Hannah noticed movement near the cabin. A tall, lanky young man emerged, followed by what appeared to be a child. Her heart stuttered. William had never mentioned children in his letters. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the cabin, and William set the brake before jumping down. He came around to help Hannah, his hands strong and steady as she descended. "Thomas," he called to the young man, "come meet Miss Greenfield." The tall youth approached, hat in hand. He couldn't have been more than 16, with a shock of sandy hair much like William's and the awkward movements of someone not yet comfortable in a rapidly growing body. "This is Thomas Cooper, works for me," William explained. "Best hand I've got, though don't tell him I said so." The boy blushed furiously. "Pleasure to meet you, madam." "And you, Thomas," Hannah replied with a smile, relieved that he wasn't William's son, but then her eyes fell on the small figure partially hidden behind Thomas. A little girl, no more than 5 or 6, with hair the same sandy shade as William's and eyes that matched his precisely. And beyond her, peering around the corner of the cabin, was another child, a boy perhaps 8 or 9 years old. William followed her gaze and cleared his throat. "And these are my children, Emma and James." Hannah felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Children. William had children. He had never once mentioned them in his letters, not in a single line of their correspondence. The little girl Emma stepped forward shyly. Her dress was clean but obviously mended in several places, her hair hastily braided and already coming loose. The boy remained where he was, his expression wary and guarded. "Children," William continued, his voice gruff, "this is Miss Greenfield. She's come all the way from Boston." Emma moved closer, looking up at Hannah with wide blue eyes. "Are you going to be our new mama?" she asked plainly. Hannah felt tears spring to her eyes unbidden. These children had no mother, and William had sought a wife without ever mentioning them. She knelt down, bringing herself to Emma's level, even as she felt the weight of William's gaze upon her. "Hello, Emma," she said softly, struggling to keep her voice steady. "It's very nice to meet you." Emma reached out one small finger to touch the lace at Hannah's collar. "You're pretty," she declared. "Prettier than the lady in Papa's photograph." Hannah felt William stiffen beside her. "Emma," he said sharply, "that's enough." The girl ducked her head, but not before Hannah caught the hurt in her eyes. She rose to her feet, composing herself with effort. "Mr. Blackett, perhaps we could speak privately for a moment." His expression closed immediately, but he nodded. "Thomas, get Miss Greenfield's trunk inside. Emma, James, help Thomas while I show Miss Greenfield around." Hannah followed William a short distance from the cabin, waiting until they were out of earshot before speaking. "You never mentioned children in your letters, Mr. Blackett." William's back was to her, his shoulders tense beneath his worn shirt. When he turned, his expression was defensive. "Would you have come if I had?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know, but I should have been given the choice to decide." "Most women wouldn't want another woman's children," he said flatly. "I needed someone who would see them first before making judgments." "That hardly seems fair to anyone involved," Hannah replied, anger flaring despite her best efforts. "What of their mother? Is she dead?" William cut in. 3 years now, childbirth fever, the baby didn't survive either." Hannah's anger deflated slightly at the pain evident in his clipped words. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Blackett. Truly I am, but deceiving me wasn't the answer." "I didn't deceive you," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "I just didn't tell you everything. There's a difference." "A difference that matters very little from where I stand," Hannah replied. She glanced back at the cabin where Emma was watching them with undisguised interest. The boy, James, had disappeared. "How old are they?" "Emma's 5, James is 9. He hesitated, then added, "They've been without a mother for too long." Hannah shook her head, torn between sympathy and indignation. "What exactly did you expect would happen when I arrived, that I would simply step into the role without question?" "I expected you to see them and understand why I did what I did," William answered, his voice low and intense. "They need someone. I can provide for them, protect them, but they need more than that." Emma doesn't even remember her mother properly, and James, he broke off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. James hasn't been the same since she died. Hannah felt the weight of his words, of the desperation behind them. She looked again at the little girl standing by the cabin, at the hopeful expression on her small face. Whatever William's deception, the children were innocent. "I came here expecting to marry a stranger, Mr. Blackett," she said finally. "I just didn't expect there to be 3 strangers instead of 1. Something like relief flickered in his eyes. "Does that mean you're staying?" Hannah hesitated. "For now, but I make no promises beyond that. We need to become acquainted properly, all of us, before any decisions are made about marriage." William nodded slowly. "That's fair, more than fair, considering." As they walked back to the cabin, Hannah felt Emma's eyes tracking her every move. The child's eagerness was both touching and terrifying. What if she couldn't be what these children needed? What if she failed them as she feared she might fail as a rancher's wife? The interior of the cabin was simple, but sturdier than Hannah had expected. A large main room served as kitchen, dining, and living space, with a substantial stone fireplace dominating one wall. 2 doors led off from the main room bedrooms, she presumed. "It's not much," William said, watching her take in the surroundings, "but it's solid, keeps out the winter cold." "It's lovely," Hannah said honestly. The cabin was clean, if somewhat spartanly furnished. A wooden table with 4 chairs sat near the cooking area, and a worn but comfortable-looking sofa faced the fireplace. Several books were stacked neatly on a small shelf, and a rag rug brightened the plank floor. Emma had followed them inside and now hovered near Hannah's elbow. "Do you want to see my room?" she asked eagerly. "I share with Papa, but he said I might get to share with you instead if you stayed." Hannah felt color rise to her cheeks, but William quickly intervened. "Emma, Miss Greenfield will have my room. I'll bunk with James for now." "Where is James?" Hannah asked, noticing the boy's absence. "Probably in the barn," William replied with a sigh. "He spends most of his time there since," he stopped, glancing at Emma. "He's good with the animals." Hannah understood the unspoken words. Since his mother died, the thought of a child retreating into himself after such a loss made her heart ache. "I'll show you to your room," William said. "You must be tired from your journey." The bedroom was small but neat, with a hand-carved bed covered by a patchwork quilt, a chest of drawers, and a small mirror hanging on the wall. Hannah noticed that all personal items had been removed. This was clearly William's room, hastily cleared for her arrival. "Thank you," she said, suddenly feeling the full weight of exhaustion from her travels. "I think I would like to rest a while before dinner." William nodded. "Emma, come help me with the evening chores. Let Miss Greenfield have some peace." After they left, Hannah sank onto the bed, finally allowing the tears she had been holding back to fall. Children, she had come prepared to be a wife, but a mother as well. The prospect was terrifying. Her own mother had been loving but reserved, and Hannah had never spent much time around children. What did she know of mothering, especially mothering children who had already lost so much? When she woke, the light had changed, taking on the golden quality of early evening. Hannah quickly freshened up, pinning her dark hair back neatly and changing into a clean dress from her trunk. She could hear voices from the main room, William's deep timbre and Emma's high, excited chatter. Hannah took a deep breath and opened the door. William stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. Emma was setting the table with careful concentration, while Thomas sat mending what appeared to be a bridle. There was still no sign of James. "Ah, you're up," William said, looking over his shoulder. "Dinner's nearly ready." "Nothing fancy, just stew and biscuits." "It smells wonderful," Hannah replied truthfully. Her stomach rumbled in response to the savory aroma. Emma beamed up at her. "Papa makes the best stew. He puts extra carrots in mine because I like them." Hannah smiled at the child, her heart warming despite her lingering anxiety. "That's very thoughtful of him." "James," William called toward the door. "Dinner." A few moments later, the boy appeared, wiping his hands on his pants. He gave Hannah a quick, assessing glance before taking his seat at the table without a word. Dinner was a somewhat awkward affair. Emma chattered happily, William and Thomas discussed ranch matters, and James ate in silence, his eyes rarely leaving his plate. Hannah answered Emma's many questions about Boston and life in the East, conscious of William watching her interactions with his daughter. After the meal, Thomas excused himself to check on a mare that was close to foaling. James disappeared again, this time without a word. "He's shy," Emma explained, as if sensing Hannah's concern. "Mama said he was just like Papa that way, keeping everything bottled up inside." William's jaw tightened, but he said nothing as he began clearing the dishes. "Let me help," Hannah offered, rising to assist him. They worked side by side in silence, washing and drying the dishes. Emma yawned widely, and William nodded toward the bedroom. "Time for bed, little one. Say good night to Miss Greenfield." To Hannah's surprise, Emma threw her arms around her waist in a quick, fierce hug before scampering off to her room. The simple gesture of trust brought a lump to Hannah's throat. Once Emma was settled, William poured 2 cups of coffee and motioned for Hannah to join him at the table. "I should check on James," he said, hesitating. "Of course," Hannah nodded. "I'll wait." William returned a few minutes later, his expression troubled. "He's in the hayloft, says he wants to sleep there tonight." Hannah sipped her coffee, giving herself a moment to choose her words carefully. It must be difficult for him, having a stranger arrive without warning. William's shoulders slumped slightly. James took Sarah's death the hardest. He was old enough to understand, and he was there when he stopped, staring into his coffee cup. He was there when she died. "I was out with the herd when her time came, and by the time I got back, it was too late. The doctor couldn't save her or the baby." Hannah felt a deep pang of sympathy. "I'm so sorry, William, for all of you." It was the first time she had used his given name, and he looked up, startled, before continuing. "James hasn't been the same since. Barely speaks, spends all his time with the animals. I thought," he paused, searching for words, "I thought having a woman around might help him, help both of them." "Children need time," Hannah said gently, "and honesty. They deserve that much at least." William winced at the implicit rebuke. "I know I should have told you about them in my letters." He ran a hand through his hair in a gesture Hannah was beginning to recognize as a sign of his frustration. "After Sarah died, I tried to manage on my own. Thomas has been a godsend, but he's just a boy himself. Emma needs a woman's guidance, and James needs something I can't give him." Hannah studied William's face, seeing beyond the weathered exterior to the worry etched in the lines around his eyes. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Out of all the responses you must have received to your advertisement, why choose me?" William seemed surprised by the question. "Your letters," he said simply. "You were honest, straightforward, no romantic notions about life out here, and you wrote about losing your parents, about having to make your own way afterward. I thought you might understand what it means to rebuild after loss." His perception startled her. It was true that she had written of her parents' deaths and the challenges that followed, but she hadn't expected him to draw such connections. "I do understand loss," Hannah acknowledged, "but becoming a mother overnight is different from opening a millinery shop." A faint smile touched William's lips. "Fair point." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the tension between them easing slightly. "I meant what I said earlier," Hannah finally continued. "I'll stay, at least for now. But we need to be honest with each other going forward, and we need to take this slowly, for the children's sake as much as our own." William nodded. "Thank you for giving us a chance." As Hannah prepared for bed that night in William's room, she pondered the strange turn her life had taken. She had come west seeking security and perhaps companionship, but now found herself faced with a ready-made family and all the complexities that entailed. William's deception troubled her, yet she couldn't deny the plight of his children touched her deeply. Emma, so eager for a mother's love, and James, so wounded by its loss they deserved stability and care. Whether she was the right person to provide it remained to be seen, but Hannah determined to at least try. For now, that would have to be enough. Morning arrived with the crowing of a rooster and the sounds of movement in the main room. Hannah dressed quickly and emerged to find William already at the stove, frying bacon while Emma set the table. "Good morning," Hannah said, smoothing her skirt. Emma beamed at her. "Papa let me feed the chickens all by myself." That's wonderful, Hannah replied, smiling at the child's enthusiasm. Perhaps you can show me how later. William glanced over his shoulder. Sleep well? Yes, thank you. It wasn't entirely true she had lain awake for hours pondering her situation, but the bed had been comfortable enough. James is already out with the horses, William explained, answering her unspoken question. And Thomas is checking the fence line in the north pasture. It's just the three of us for breakfast. The meal was simpler than dinner: bacon, biscuits left from the night before, and strong coffee. Hannah noticed that William gave Emma the crispest pieces of bacon, a small gesture that spoke volumes about his care for his daughter. I thought I might show you around the ranch today, William said as they finished eating. Unless you'd prefer to settle in first. I'd like to see it, Hannah replied. After all, if I'm to stay, I should know my surroundings. Emma bounced in her seat. Can I come too, Papa? I can show Miss Greenfield the creek where the frogs live. William hesitated, then nodded. For part of the way, but then you need to help Mrs. Peterson with the mending when she arrives. Hannah raised an eyebrow in question. Martha Peterson comes by twice a week to help with the washing and mending, William explained. She has a farm about 2 miles east with her husband. She's been a godsend since we've been on our own. After breakfast, William saddled 3 horses, a gentle mare for Hannah, his own sturdy gelding, and a small pony for Emma. Hannah was relieved to discover that her riding lessons as a girl in Boston, though limited, had prepared her adequately for the western saddle. The day was clear and bright, the Montana sky stretching endlessly above them as they rode from the cabin. William pointed out the boundaries of his property, the creek that provided water year-round and the best grazing areas for the cattle. Hannah was struck by the obvious pride he took in what he had built. It's impressive, she said honestly as they paused on a rise overlooking the valley. To have created all this in just 6 years, William's expression softened. It wasn't easy at first. Sarah and I lived in a tent that first summer while I built the cabin. James was just a baby then. We nearly gave up that first winter. It was the coldest in 20 years, according to the old-timers. But you didn't give up, Hannah observed. No, he agreed. Sarah wouldn't let us. She said we'd come too far to turn back. There was a wealth of emotion in those few words, and Hannah felt a pang of something like jealousy toward this woman. She had never met this Sarah who had shared William's struggles and dreams, who had given him children and a purpose. Papa, look. Emma called, pointing toward a distant figure on horseback. It's James. Sure enough, the boy was visible across the valley, riding at a gallop through the tall grass. Even from a distance, Hannah could see the fluid grace with which he moved with the horse, as if they were a single being. He has a way with horses, William said, watching his son with obvious pride. Better than most grown men. They continued their tour, with Emma eagerly pointing out her favorite spots: the hollow tree where a family of rabbits lived, the stand of wild berries that would ripen later in summer, the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in profusion. As they neared the creek, they spotted James watering his horse. He stiffened when he saw them approaching, his young face closing off. James, Emma called out cheerfully, we're showing Miss Greenfield the ranch. The boy nodded curtly but said nothing. William dismounted. Son, why don't you show Miss Greenfield that trick you taught Thunder? The one with the handkerchief. James looked as if he might refuse, but after a moment's hesitation, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a faded red handkerchief. With deliberate movements, he placed it on a flat rock by the creek's edge, then remounted his horse and backed up several yards. At a subtle signal from James, the black gelding trotted forward, stopped precisely at the rock, and lowered its head. With careful delicacy, the horse picked up the handkerchief in its teeth, then turned and carried it back to James, who accepted it with a gentle pat to the animal's neck. That's remarkable, Hannah said, genuinely impressed. I've never seen anything like it. A flicker of pride crossed James's face before he tucked it away behind his mask of indifference. Thunder's smart, he said quietly, the first words Hannah had heard him speak. He must be, she agreed, but a horse is only as good as its trainer. James studied her for a moment, as if assessing her sincerity, then nodded once before turning his horse away. "I need to check the western pasture," he said to his father. William watched him go with a mixture of concern and resignation. He's always been quiet, but not like this. Before Sarah died, you couldn't shut him up once he got started talking about the horses. Emma had dismounted and was busy collecting pebbles from the creek bed, giving them privacy to talk. "Grief affects everyone differently," Hannah said gently, "especially children. My mother always said that children feel things just as deeply as adults, but they don't always have the words to express those feelings." William looked at her with sudden interest. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." Hannah smiled sadly. "She was. I miss her every day, even now." "How did you cope?" he asked. "After you lost your parents," Hannah considered the question. "I kept busy, threw myself into trying to save the shop. When that failed, I focused on finding a new path. I suppose I never really stopped to properly grieve until much later." "That sounds familiar," William admitted. "After Sarah, there was so much to do, the children to care for, the ranch to run. It was easier to work from dawn to dusk than to face the emptiness." Their eyes met in a moment of shared understanding, and Hannah felt something shift between them, not romance, exactly, but a connection rooted in common experience. The moment was broken by Emma's delighted cry as she discovered a frog among the reeds. William smiled fondly at his daughter's excitement, then checked the position of the sun. "We should head back. Mrs. Peterson will be arriving soon, and I need to check on a calf that was born yesterday." The ride back to the cabin was pleasant, with Emma chattering happily about the frog she had named Herbert and her plans to show Hannah all her favorite books later. Hannah found herself warming to the child's innocent enthusiasm and open heart. As William had predicted, Martha Peterson was waiting at the cabin when they returned. She was a stout woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that took in Hannah with frank curiosity. "So you're the bride from back east," she said, after William made the introductions. "Got your hands full with this bunch, I'd say, Mrs. Peterson," William warned, but the older woman waved him off. "Oh, hush, she deserves to know what she's getting into." Martha turned back to Hannah. "These are good people, mind you, the best, but they've had it rough, and that leaves marks." Hannah appreciated the woman's directness. "I'm beginning to understand that," Martha nodded approvingly. "Good. You look like you've got a level head on your shoulders. Now, Emma, let's see to that mending while your pa and Miss Greenfield talk." Once Martha had ushered Emma inside, William shifted awkwardly. "Mrs. Peterson means well. She and Sarah were close." "I like her honesty," Hannah assured him. "It's refreshing after," she stopped, not wanting to reopen the wound of his deception so soon after their tentative truce. "After my omissions," William finished for her. "I deserve that and worse," Hannah shook her head. "I didn't say that to make you feel guilty. We've agreed to move forward and I meant it." William's expression eased slightly. "Thank you for that and for how you are with Emma." "She's taken to you already. She's a delightful child," Hannah said honestly, "very open-hearted." "Like her mother," William murmured, then cleared his throat. "I need to check that calf. Will you be all right with Mrs. Peterson and Emma?" Hannah nodded. "Of course, go tend to your ranch." After William left, Hannah joined Martha and Emma in the cabin. The older woman had set up a basket of mending and was showing Emma how to patch a torn shirt sleeve. "So," Martha said without preamble once Emma was absorbed in her task, "William finally found the courage to send for a bride." Hannah settled into a chair across from them. "It seems so, though he neglected to mention certain important details in his letters," Martha snorted. "The children, you mean? I told him that was foolishness, but men rarely listen to sense when they've set their minds on something." "Did you know Sarah well?" Hannah asked, curious about the woman whose place she was potentially filling. Martha's eyes softened. "Since she was a girl. My family and hers came west in the same wagon train. She was always full of life, singing, laughing. Not practical enough for frontier life, some said, but she had a way of making hardship seem like an adventure." Hannah tried to reconcile this description with the cabin's practical furnishings and William's serious demeanor. They seem an unlikely match. "Oh, they were," Martha agreed, threading a needle with practiced ease. "Complete opposites in most ways, but they balanced each other. He kept her grounded, and she taught him to see beauty in the everyday after she died." Martha glanced at Emma to ensure she wasn't listening too closely. A light went out in this place, in all of them. Hannah felt the weight of the older woman's words. I'm not trying to replace her, she said quietly. I couldn't even if I wanted to. Good, Martha said firmly, because you shouldn't. They don't need another Sarah. They need you, whoever you turn out to be. The simplicity of this statement struck Hannah deeply. She had been so concerned about measuring up to a ghost that she hadn't considered the possibility that what this family needed wasn't a replacement at all, but something entirely different. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson, she said sincerely. That's oddly comforting, Martha chuckled. Call me Martha, and you're welcome. Now do you know how to darn socks, because Williams are in a dreadful state? The afternoon passed pleasantly as Martha taught Hannah the particular skills needed for maintaining clothes on a ranch, stronger stitches for work clothes, how to patch knees and elbows that saw the most wear, the best way to darn woolen socks for the harsh Montana winters. Emma proved to be an eager if somewhat clumsy assistant, her small fingers struggling with the needle but her determination never wavering. By the time Martha gathered her things to leave, Hannah had a new appreciation for the practical knowledge required to run a frontier household. I'll be back on Saturday, Martha told her. But send Emma over if you need anything before then. My Robert's always happy to bring a message. After the older woman left, Hannah turned her attention to preparing dinner. The kitchen was well stocked but simply equipped, and she was grateful for the cooking lessons her mother had insisted upon despite their comfortable circumstances in Boston. Emma stayed close, watching Hannah's every move with keen interest. Mama used to let me help stir, she ventured cautiously. Hannah smiled. Would you like to stir the stew? The child nodded eagerly, and Hannah lifted her onto a stool by the stove, guiding her small hand on the wooden spoon. Gentle circles like this, she demonstrated. Emma's face shone with concentration. Papa says I'm good at helping. I can see that, Hannah agreed. You're very capable for your age. James helps too, Emma continued, but he's sad a lot. Mama said he feels things deeply, like the still waters that run deep in her storybook. Hannah was continually surprised by the wisdom that occasionally emerged from the child's innocent observations. Your mama sounds very wise. Emma nodded solemnly. She knew lots of stories. Do you know stories, Miss Greenfield? Some, Hannah admitted. My father used to read to me every night before bed. Will you read to me? Emma asked, hope shining in her blue eyes. Hannah felt something in her heart shift. I'd like that very much, Emma. The door opened then, and William entered with James trailing silently behind him. Both were dusty from the day's work, but William's face relaxed noticeably at the sight of Hannah and Emma at the stove. Something smells good, he said, removing his hat. Miss Greenfield let me help with the stew, Emma announced proudly. I stirred it all by myself. William's eyes met Hannah's over his daughter's head, gratitude evident in his expression. Is that so? Well, I'm sure it will be the best stew we've ever had. James said nothing, but Hannah noticed him watching their interaction closely, his young face unreadable. Wash up, you two, Hannah said, surprising herself with how naturally the instruction came. Dinner will be ready soon. As the days passed, Hannah gradually found her place within the rhythms of ranch life. Each morning brought new tasks, collecting eggs from the henhouse, learning to make cheese from the milk provided by their 2 dairy cows, hanging laundry in the bright Montana sunshine. Martha proved an invaluable teacher, patiently guiding Hannah through the skills she lacked. William worked from dawn until dusk, often with James shadowing him silently. Thomas, whom Hannah discovered was an orphan William had taken in 3 years prior, handled much of the daily care of the horses and helped with the endless chores required to maintain the ranch. Emma attached herself to Hannah like a shadow whenever possible, her innocent chatter filling the spaces of the day. Hannah found herself looking forward to their bedtime ritual when Emma would choose a story from the small collection of books in the cabin, and Hannah would read until the child's eyes grew heavy with sleep. It was during one such evening, nearly 2 weeks after Hannah's arrival, that Emma asked the question Hannah had been dreading. When are you going to marry Papa and be our mama for real? Hannah set the book aside, choosing her words carefully. Emma, your papa and I are still getting to know each other. Marriage is a very important decision that grown-ups need to think about carefully. Emma's brow furrowed. But you like us, don't you? Very much, Hannah assured her, smoothing a strand of sandy hair from the child's forehead. Especially you. This made Emma smile, but her expression quickly turned serious again. James likes you too, even though he doesn't say it. Hannah doubted this was true. While James was unfailingly polite when forced to interact with her, he had yet to seek out her company or engage in conversation beyond necessary exchanges. I hope that someday James and I can be friends, Hannah said honestly. But these things take time. Emma yawned widely. Papa says good things are worth waiting for, like when the apples are finally ripe enough to pick or when the wildflowers bloom after the snow melts. Hannah smiled at the comparison. Your papa is a wise man. After Emma fell asleep, Hannah made her way back to the main room where William sat at the table cleaning his rifle by lamplight. He looked up as she entered, setting aside his work. Is she asleep? Hannah nodded, taking the chair across from him. She asked when we're getting married. William winced. I'm sorry, she's been asking me the same question every day. It's understandable, Hannah said. Children crave stability. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. These evening conversations had become a ritual of sorts, a quiet time when they could speak freely without little ears listening. I received a letter from the lumber mill in Billings today, William said eventually. They've agreed to my price for the timber from the North Slope. It means I can add that second bedroom we discussed before winter comes. Hannah nodded appreciatively. They had talked about converting the small storage room off the main room into a proper bedroom for the children, giving everyone more space and privacy. That's wonderful news. Emma will be delighted to have her own special place. William studied her face in the warm glow of the lamp. You've made a real difference here, Hannah. In just 2 weeks, there's been a change in this household. Emma smiles more, even James seems less withdrawn. Hannah wasn't sure about the latter observation, but she accepted the compliment gracefully. They're wonderful children. Emma makes it easy to care for her. And James? William asked, his voice carefully neutral. Hannah sighed. James is more challenging. He's polite enough, but I feel like he's constantly evaluating me, waiting for me to make a mistake. He's protecting himself, William said softly, and Emma and me, though he doesn't need to. From what? Hannah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. From caring about someone who might leave, William replied, confirming her thoughts. After Sarah died, he made me promise I wouldn't go away too. I think he's afraid to let anyone else into his heart. The vulnerability in William's expression, as he spoke of his son, touched something deep within Hannah. Despite his initial deception, she had come to see the depth of his love for his children and his determination to do right by them. William, she said hesitantly, I've been thinking about our arrangement. His face immediately shuddered as if bracing for rejection. Yes, I think I would like to stay, to see where this might lead, with you, with the children, all of it. The hope that bloomed in his eyes was almost painful to witness. Are you sure? I know this isn't what you expected when you answered my advertisement. It's not, Hannah agreed. It's more complicated, more challenging, and frankly more frightening than I anticipated, but also more rewarding. William reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. I can't promise it will be easy. Ranch life never is. But I can promise to be honest from now on, to work hard, and to try to be worthy of the chance you're giving us. Hannah turned her hand under his, allowing their fingers to intertwine. It was the first real physical contact between them beyond the necessary assistance of daily life, and she felt a small thrill at the warmth of his skin against hers. That's all any of us can do, she said softly. Try our best, day by day. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then William gently squeezed her hand before releasing it. It's getting late. We should both get some rest. Hannah nodded, rising from the table. At the door to her room, which she still thought of as William's room, despite his continued insistence that it was now hers, she paused. Good night, William. His smile in response held a warmth that hadn't been there when she first arrived. Good night, Hannah. Sleep well. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the promise of summer heat later in the day. Hannah was already at the stove preparing breakfast when William emerged from the children's room, his hair still damp from washing. "Emma's up, but James already headed out to the barn," he explained, accepting the cup of coffee Hannah handed him. "He wants to start breaking that new colt today." Hannah frowned slightly. "Is that safe? He's only 9. William's expression softened at her concern. "He knows what he's doing. Been handling horses since he could walk, and I'll be keeping an eye on him." "Still," Hannah persisted, "he's a child. Children need supervision." "They also need to learn responsibility," William countered, though his tone remained gentle. "Out here, everyone contributes according to their abilities. James has a gift with horses, and denying him that would do more harm than good." Hannah recognized the logic in his argument, even as her instinct was to protect the boy from potential harm. It was one of many cultural adjustments she was still making to frontier life. "I understand," she conceded, "but promise me you'll be careful, both of you." William's expression warmed. "I promise." Emma bounded into the room then, her hair in disarray but her smile bright. "Miss Greenfield. Papa says we're going to town today for supplies. Can I show you the general store? They have candy sticks in a big jar on the counter." Hannah looked to William in surprise. "We're going to town," he nodded. "Need to order those lumber supplies, and we're running low on flour and sugar. Thought you might like to see Silver Creek properly this time, not just from the stagecoach window." The prospect of visiting town after 2 weeks of relative isolation was appealing. Hannah had been so focused on adjusting to ranch life that she hadn't given much thought to the wider community. "I'd like that very much," she said, turning back to the stove to hide the pleasure his thoughtfulness brought her. After breakfast, Hannah helped Emma into her best dress, a faded blue cotton that had clearly been let down several times to accommodate the child's growth, and carefully braided her hair. For herself, Hannah chose her second best dress, a green cotton with white trim that had traveled surprisingly well in her trunk. William appeared in clean clothes as well, his hair neatly combed and his beard trimmed. The transformation from working rancher to presentable townsman was subtle but noticeable, and Hannah found herself appreciating the strong line of his jaw and the clarity of his blue eyes. "James has decided to stay behind with Thomas," William explained as he helped Hannah and Emma into the wagon. "They want to work with that new colt." Hannah felt a pang of disappointment. She had hoped that the outing might provide an opportunity to connect with the reserved boy, but she understood his reluctance to spend time in her company. The ride to Silver Creek took just under an hour, with Emma pointing out landmarks along the way and William occasionally adding historical context or practical information about the area. Hannah found herself relaxing in their company, enjoying the simple pleasure of a family outing. Silver Creek itself was larger than Hannah had initially realized during her brief stop at the stagecoach station. The main street boasted a general store, a smithy, a small church, a schoolhouse, and even a modest hotel with an attached restaurant. Several side streets revealed additional businesses and residences. "It's grown considerably in the last few years," William explained as he guided the wagon down the main thoroughfare. "The railroad coming through 20 miles south brought more settlers." They stopped first at the general store, where William introduced Hannah to the proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, a balding man with spectacles and a ready smile. "So you're the lady who answered William's advertisement," he said, shaking Hannah's hand warmly. "The whole town's been curious. We were starting to think this stubborn fellow would never remarry." Hannah felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "We're still becoming acquainted," she said diplomatically, aware of Emma listening intently nearby. Mr. Jenkins winked. Of course. "Well, any friend of the Blacketts is welcome here. Emma, I believe there might be a peppermint stick with your name on it if you ask your pa nicely." While Emma delightedly claimed her treat and William discussed his order with Mr. Jenkins, Hannah browsed the store's offerings. The variety was impressive for a frontier town: fabrics, household goods, tools, canned foods, and even a small selection of books and paper goods. A display of writing paper and envelopes caught her eye. She had yet to write to her friend Margaret in Boston, who would be wondering how her Western adventure was progressing. Hannah selected a modest packet, adding it to William's order. As they continued their errands around town, stopping at the lumberyard, the post office, and the smithy, Hannah became aware of the curious glances directed their way. It seemed word of her arrival had indeed spread through the small community, and she was being evaluated as William Blackett's potential bride. At the smithy, a tall woman with auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun approached them directly. "William Blackett, aren't you going to introduce me to your guest?" William straightened, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Greenfield, this is Miss Harriet Coleman, our schoolteacher. Miss Coleman, this is Miss Hannah Greenfield from Boston." The woman's assessing gaze swept over Hannah from head to toe. "From Boston? How interesting. I imagine frontier life must be quite an adjustment for you." Something in her tone suggested more than polite interest, and Hannah sensed an undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. "It is different," Hannah acknowledged with a polite smile, "but very rewarding." "Miss Coleman taught James last year," William explained, before we decided homeschooling would be better suited to his needs." Understanding dawned. This woman had some history with the Blackett family, and not entirely positive from William's careful phrasing. "James is an exceptionally bright boy," Miss Coleman said. "It's a shame he's being denied a proper education, and Emma should be starting school this fall as well." Emma, who had been examining horseshoes on a nearby rack, scampered back to Hannah's side and slipped her small hand into Hannah's larger one. The gesture of trust was not lost on Miss Coleman, whose lips tightened slightly. "We're still considering our options for Emma's education," William said firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have more errands to complete." As they walked away, Hannah glanced back to find Miss Coleman watching them with narrowed eyes. "She doesn't like me," Emma whispered, squeezing Hannah's hand. "I'm sure that's not true," Hannah replied automatically, though she wondered if the child might be more perceptive than she gave her credit for. William sighed once they were out of earshot. "Harriet Coleman has strong opinions about how children should be raised. She and Sarah often disagreed on the subject. After Sarah died, she took it upon herself to offer advice on the children's upbringing that wasn't welcome. And perhaps other advice as well," Hannah guessed, noting the tension in his shoulders. William glanced at her sharply. "She made it clear that she would consider marriage if I were interested. I wasn't." The simple statement shouldn't have pleased Hannah as much as it did, but she couldn't deny the small flutter of satisfaction. She had wondered if there might have been other candidates for wife and mother right here in Silver Creek, women who already knew the children and the demands of frontier life. "She doesn't seem the type to take rejection well," Hannah observed. William's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "That's putting it mildly. She's convinced that Emma is running wild and James is being ruined by lack of formal education." "And what do you think?" Hannah asked, curious about his views on the subject. William considered the question as they continued down the boardwalk. "I think children need different things. James learns by doing. He can calculate feed quantities and breeding cycles in his head faster than most grown men with a slate and pencil. And Emma." He glanced down at his daughter, who was now skipping ahead of them. "Emma needs freedom to be herself before the world tries to shape her into something else." There was something so genuine in his assessment, so thoughtful about his children's individual needs, that Hannah felt a new respect for this man who had initially deceived her. Whatever his flaws, William Blackett was a father who truly saw his children. "I think you're right," she said softly. "Education isn't one size fits all, especially out here." The relief in William's eyes suggested he had expected her to side with the schoolteacher. Sarah felt the same way. "She taught the children at home before. Well, before. I've tried to continue, but there's only so many hours in a day." Hannah sensed an opportunity. "I could help with that. I had a good education in Boston, and I've always enjoyed books and learning." William's expression brightened. "You do that, of course. It would be a pleasure, not a chore." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Hannah felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the summer sun. Emma danced back to them, breaking the moment. "Papa, can we eat at the hotel restaurant, please? Miss Greenfield hasn't tried Mrs. Rivera's apple pie." William chuckled, ruffling his daughter's hair. "I suppose we could, since we have a guest to impress." The hotel restaurant was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and vases of wildflowers on each table. Mrs. Rivera, a plump woman with a warm smile and hints of Mexican ancestry in her features, greeted them enthusiastically. "William Blackett, it's been too long. And you've brought your little Emma, not so little anymore, I see, and this must be the bride from back east." "Sit, sit, I'll bring my special chicken and dumplings. On the house for such a special occasion." Hannah opened her mouth to correct the assumption that she was already William's bride, but the woman had already bustled away, leaving them to settle at a corner table. "Mrs. Rivera is enthusiastic," William said apologetically, "but her food is the best in 3 counties." He wasn't exaggerating. The chicken and dumplings were the most delicious Hannah had tasted, and the apple pie that followed was sweet and flaky perfection. Throughout the meal, various townspeople stopped by their table to introduce themselves to Hannah, each clearly curious about the woman William Blackett had brought from the East. By the time they finished, Hannah's head was swimming with new names and faces, but she had a better understanding of the community William and his children were part of. It was a close-knit group, with the usual small-town dynamics of gossip and watchfulness, but also genuine concern and support for one another. As they were preparing to leave, the door to the restaurant opened, and a distinguished-looking man in a black suit entered. His gray hair and beard were neatly trimmed, and he carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to respect. "Judge Porter," William acknowledged with a nod. "Blackett," the man returned, then his gaze fell on Hannah. "And this must be Miss Greenfield. A pleasure to meet you, my dear. My wife has been most curious about William's mail-order bride." Again, Hannah found herself described as William's bride, though they had made no formal commitment beyond her agreement to stay and see where their relationship might lead. Before she could correct him, William spoke. "Miss Greenfield has kindly agreed to stay with us while we determine if a more permanent arrangement would be suitable," he said carefully. "Nothing has been decided yet." The judge's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Well, that seems a sensible approach. Miss Greenfield, I hope you'll find Silver Creek to your liking. We're a simple community, but good-hearted for the most part." "Thank you, Judge Porter," Hannah replied. "Everyone has been very welcoming so far." As they left the restaurant, Hannah found herself reflecting on the complexities of small-town life. In Boston, her comings and goings had been of interest only to her immediate circle of friends and family. Here, it seemed her presence was noteworthy to the entire community. "I'm sorry about all the assumptions," William said as he helped her into the wagon. "Small towns run on gossip, and a man sending for a mail-order bride is prime fodder." "It's all right," Hannah assured him. "I understand their curiosity, and everyone has been kind, if a bit forward." Emma, who had been unusually quiet during the meal, suddenly spoke up. "Miss Coleman wasn't kind. She looked at Miss Greenfield like she was something nasty on her shoe." "Emma," William admonished, though Hannah couldn't help but laugh at the child's accurate assessment. "It's fine, William. Emma's right, and I appreciate her honesty." She turned to the little girl. "Sometimes adults don't always show their true feelings on their faces, but you're very observant to notice." Emma beamed at the praise, settling against Hannah's side as William guided the wagon out of town. The simple trust in the gesture warmed Hannah's heart, and she found herself wrapping an arm around the child's shoulders without conscious thought. William glanced over at them, his expression softening at the sight. In that moment, with the summer sun warming her shoulders and Emma's small body nestled trustingly against her side, Hannah could almost imagine that this was her family, that she belonged with them, to them. The thought was as terrifying as it was compelling. The ride back to the ranch was quieter, with Emma eventually nodding off against Hannah's side, lulled by the wagon's gentle rocking motion. Hannah and William spoke little, but the silence between them was comfortable rather than strained. As they approached the ranch, Hannah noticed a horse she didn't recognize tied at the hitching post near the cabin. William frowned, his posture straightening. "That's Doc Wilson's mare," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Something must be wrong." Hannah's thoughts immediately flew to James. "The colt, you said he was breaking a new colt today." William's jaw tightened as he urged the horses to a faster pace. When they reached the cabin, he jumped down from the wagon before it had fully stopped, leaving Hannah to manage Emma, who was now groggily awake. "Stay here," he instructed sharply before striding toward the cabin. Hannah helped Emma down, her heart pounding with worry. Had James been hurt? Was that why the doctor was here? Before she could follow William, Thomas emerged from the barn, his face streaked with dust and worry. "Miss Greenfield, thank goodness you're back. It's James, he's taken sick, real bad, real fast." Relief that it wasn't an injury was quickly replaced by fresh concern. "Sick? How? He seemed fine this morning." Thomas shook his head. "Don't rightly know, madam. He was working with that colt 1 minute, fine as could be, and the next he was doubled over, burning up with fever. He kept saying his stomach hurt something fierce. Doc's in with him now." Hannah knelt to Emma's level, keeping her voice calm despite her concern. "Emma, Thomas is going to take you to the barn to see the new kittens while I go check on James. Would you like that?" Emma's eyes were wide with worry, but she nodded. "Is Jamie going to die like Mama?" The question, so direct and fearful, pierced Hannah's heart. "No, sweetheart. The doctor is here to make him better, I promise." She had no right to make such a promise, but the terror in the child's eyes demanded nothing less. Hannah squeezed Emma's shoulders reassuringly before nodding to Thomas, who led the little girl toward the barn with gentle encouragement. Inside the cabin, Hannah found William standing rigidly by the children's bedroom door, his face a mask of contained fear as he listened to the doctor within. Without thinking, Hannah moved to his side and placed a hand on his arm. He started at the contact, then relaxed slightly, covering her hand with his own. "Doc says it's appendicitis," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "He needs to operate, here, now." Hannah gasped softly. She had heard of appendicitis, a cousin had suffered from it years ago, but the thought of surgery in a frontier cabin without proper facilities was terrifying. "What can I do?" she asked, forcing calm into her voice. William looked down at her, gratitude flickering across his strained features. "Doc will need boiling water, clean linens, as much lamp oil as we can spare for light, and someone with steady hands to assist him." "I can do that," Hannah said with more confidence than she felt. "My mother volunteered with the hospital auxiliary in Boston. I've seen procedures before." It wasn't entirely true. She had only observed the simplest of treatments during her few visits to the charity hospital with her mother, but William needed reassurance more than complete accuracy in this moment. The bedroom door opened and a gray-haired man with spectacles emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Ah, you must be Miss Greenfield. I'm Dr. Wilson. I understand you have some medical experience." Hannah nodded, not correcting his assumption. "How is James?" "Very ill. His appendix is inflamed and must be removed before it ruptures. I've performed the procedure before, but usually in better circumstances than our ranch bedroom." He looked at William. "I've given him laudanum for the pain and to help him sleep, but we need to act quickly." William's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. "Tell us what you need, Doc." The next hour passed in a flurry of activity. Hannah boiled water, sterilized the doctor's instruments as instructed, and prepared the bedroom as best she could. William moved the small bed to the center of the room to give the doctor better access, while Thomas was sent to town with a hastily scribbled note for Mrs. Peterson, asking her to keep Emma for the night. Throughout the preparations, Hannah found herself drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. The fear was still there, how could it not be when a child's life hung in the balance? But it was channeled into purposeful action rather than paralyzing anxiety. When everything was ready, Dr. Wilson rolled up his sleeves and looked at Hannah. "I'll need you to assist, Miss Greenfield. Mr. Blackett, I think it best if you wait outside." William's expression hardened. "He's my son, I'm staying." The doctor studied William for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. But at the first sign that your presence is hindering rather than helping, you'll step out." Agreed. William nodded tersely, moving to stand at the head of the bed where James lay unconscious, his young face flushed with fever. He gently brushed the damp hair from his son's forehead, a gesture so tender that Hannah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "He's going to be all right, William," she said softly, not knowing if the words were true but needing to say them anyway. The surgery itself was both shorter and more harrowing than Hannah had anticipated. Dr. Wilson worked with practiced efficiency, explaining each step to Hannah as she handed him instruments, held lamps for better illumination, and swabbed blood from the incision site. William remained silent throughout, his face a rigid mask of control as he watched his son's life in another man's hands. Only once, when James stirred despite the laudanum and moaned in pain, did William's composure crack. His hand reached for Hannah's blindly, and she grasped it tightly, anchoring him with her touch. Finally, Dr. Wilson removed the inflamed appendix and carefully closed the incision. "It was close," he said, washing his hands in the basin Hannah provided. "Another few hours and it would have ruptured. He's lucky you noticed something was wrong so quickly." "It was Thomas who noticed," William said, his voice rough with exhaustion and relief. "Said James wasn't acting right when they were working with the colt." The doctor nodded. "That boy has good instincts. Now James will need careful watching for the next 48 hours. Fever is our biggest concern, along with infection. Keep the wound clean, give him water when he wakes, just sips at first, and send for me immediately if his fever spikes or the pain worsens." Hannah nodded, already mentally preparing for the nursing duties ahead. "I'll stay with him through the night." "We'll take shifts," William corrected gently. "Neither of us is any good to him exhausted." Dr. Wilson packed his instruments, looking satisfied with the arrangement. "I'll come back tomorrow to check on him. He's young and strong, good odds for a full recovery." After the doctor left, Hannah insisted that William eat something while she sat with James. The boy slept fitfully, occasionally murmuring in his drugged sleep. Hannah bathed his forehead with cool water, speaking softly to him when he seemed distressed. Though she wasn't sure he could hear her, William returned with a tray holding bread, cheese, and 2 cups of coffee. He set it on the small table by the bed and pulled up a second chair. "You should rest," Hannah told him, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I can watch him for a few hours." William shook his head. "I wouldn't sleep anyway." He studied his son's face in the lamplight. "When Sarah died, I promised myself I wouldn't lose anyone else. That I'd protect them no matter what. This isn't your fault," Hannah said gently. "Appendicitis can happen to anyone." "I know that, rationally." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "But when I saw Doc's horse, all I could think was that I'd failed. Again." The raw vulnerability in his voice touched something deep within Hannah. She reached across the narrow space between their chairs and took his hand. "You haven't failed, William. James is going to recover, and you're not alone in this anymore." His fingers tightened around hers. "No." "I'm not, am I?" He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Why did you stay, Hannah? After you found out about the children, about my deception, you could have taken the next stage coach back to Boston." Hannah considered the question, wanting to give him an honest answer. "At first it was for the children. They needed someone and I needed to be needed, I think. But now," he prompted when she hesitated. "Now I stay for all of you, for Emma's smiles and James's quiet courage, for this place that's beginning to feel like home, and for you, William." The admission cost her something in pride, but the way his expression softened made it worthwhile. "I don't deserve your forgiveness or your care." "Perhaps not," Hannah agreed with a small smile, "but you have them anyway." They sat in companionable silence after that, keeping vigil over James as the night deepened around them. At some point, Hannah must have dozed off, for she woke to find her head resting against William's shoulder and dawn light filtering through the small window. James was awake, his eyes clear of fever as they moved from his father's face to Hannah's. There was confusion in his expression, but something else too, a fragile recognition of what it meant to find them there together, watching over him. "You're going to be fine, son," William said, leaning forward to touch James's hand. "Doc took out your appendix last night." James nodded weakly. Hurts, he whispered. I know. William's voice was gentle, but it'll get better. Miss Greenfield is going to help take care of you. James's eyes shifted to Hannah, studying her face with an intensity that belied his weakened state. Then, to her astonishment, he moved his free hand slightly in her direction, a small gesture, but unmistakably an invitation. Hannah took his hand carefully, mindful of the strain even this small movement must cause him. You gave us quite a scare, James Blackett, she said softly, but you're very brave, the bravest boy I know. Something in the child's eyes shifted, a wall lowering just slightly. He didn't speak again, exhaustion quickly claiming him, but his hand remained in hers until he drifted back to sleep. William watched this exchange with an expression Hannah couldn't quite read. When James was sleeping peacefully again, he stood and stretched his cramped muscles. I need to check on the animals and send word to Mrs. Peterson about James. Will you be all right here for a while? Hannah nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. After William left, Hannah gently bathed James's face and hands with cool water, careful not to disturb his rest. As she worked, she found herself humming softly a lullaby her own mother had sung to her as a child. My mama used to sing that song. The quiet words startled Hannah. She looked down to find James watching her, his eyes clearer now though still shadowed with pain. Did she? Hannah asked gently. It's a beautiful melody. James nodded slightly. She sang it when I was sick, and to Emma when she was a baby. Hannah continued her ministrations, keeping her voice casual despite the significance of this moment, the first real conversation James had initiated with her. My mother sang it to me too. Maybe all mothers know the same songs. You're not our mother, James said, but without the hostility she might have expected. It was simply a statement of fact. No, Hannah agreed. I'm not, and I would never try to replace her. She sounds like she was a wonderful person. James was silent for so long that Hannah thought he might have drifted off again. Then he spoke, his voice so quiet she had to lean closer to hear. I miss her, every day. The simple admission, offered with such painful sincerity, brought tears to Hannah's eyes. Of course you do, James, and you always will. That's what happens when we love someone, they stay in our hearts even when they're gone. James considered this. Papa says you might marry him. Become part of our family. Hannah was careful with her response, knowing how important this conversation was. Your father and I are considering it, yes. But it would be a decision that affects all of us, you, Emma, your father and me. Your feelings matter very much in this. Emma wants you to stay, James said. She tells me every night before we go to sleep. Hannah smiled slightly. And what about you, James? What do you want? The boy's expression grew troubled. I don't want to forget her, my mama. You won't, Hannah assured him firmly. No one could ever take her place in your memories or in your heart. If I stay, it wouldn't be to replace her, but to be something different, someone new in your life who cares about you very much. James studied her face with an intensity that seemed beyond his years. You stayed all night. When I was sick? Yes, Hannah confirmed. Your father and I both did. No one's done that since Mama died, he said simply. Hannah felt the weight of those words, understanding what they meant coming from this wounded, careful child. I would always stay, James, whenever you or Emma needed me. That's a promise. He nodded once, then closed his eyes, the conversation having depleted his limited strength. But his hand moved slightly toward hers again, and Hannah took it gently, continuing to hum the lullaby until he fell asleep. When William returned an hour later, he found them this way, Hannah still holding James's hand, quietly singing. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before Hannah noticed him, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. Mrs. Peterson is bringing Emma home later, he said softly, entering the room. How is he? Better, I think, Hannah replied. His fever seems lower and he was awake enough to talk for a little while. William raised an eyebrow in surprise. He talked to you, Hannah nodded, about his mother. And about the possibility of me staying. William tensed slightly. What did he say? That he doesn't want to forget her, Hannah answered honestly. That Emma wants me to stay, and, she hesitated, I think he might be starting to consider the idea himself. William sank into the chair opposite her, relief evident in his posture. That's more than I hoped for, honestly. James has been so closed off since Sarah died, especially to the idea of someone new in our lives. He's protecting himself, Hannah said, echoing William's earlier words. And you, and Emma, but children are remarkably resilient when given the chance to heal. William reached across the bed, taking her free hand in his. You're remarkable, Hannah Greenfield, you know that. The simple compliment warmed her more than it should have. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No, William said firmly. You're not. Most women would have left after discovering I'd hidden the children from them. Most would have run from the responsibility, the complications. But you stayed. You cared for them for us when you had every reason not to. Hannah felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Perhaps I saw something worth staying for. Their eyes met over James's sleeping form, and Hannah felt something shift between them, a deepening of the connection that had been growing steadily since her arrival. The next 2 days were consumed with caring for James. Dr. Wilson returned as promised and pronounced himself satisfied with the boy's progress, though he cautioned that complete recovery would take weeks. Emma was delighted to be home, dividing her time between helping Hannah with simple tasks and sitting with her brother, regaling him with stories of her brief adventure at the Petersons' farm. William managed the ranch duties with Thomas's help, but spent every available moment with his family, often reading to James from adventure books in the evening while Hannah and Emma prepared dinner. It was during one such evening, nearly a week after James's surgery, that Hannah realized how seamlessly she had been incorporated into the rhythms of the Blackett household. She moved through the cabin with the confidence of familiarity, knew where every pot and utensil belonged, recognized the subtle signs of Emma's fatigue or James's discomfort. This was what family felt like, she realized with a start. Not the quiet, ordered household of her Boston childhood, but something messier, more challenging, and infinitely more rewarding. That night, after the children were asleep, Hannah joined William on the small porch. The evening was warm, the sky a riot of stars overhead. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes before William spoke. I've been thinking about what happens next, he said, his voice quiet in the darkness. For us. Hannah turned to look at him, barely able to make out his profile in the dim light spilling from the cabin window. Oh. James will be up and about in another week or so. Emma's birthday is coming up next month. The harvest will start soon after that. He paused. Life moves on whether we're ready or not. Yes, it does, Hannah agreed, wondering where this was leading. William shifted to face her more directly. When you first arrived, I asked you to consider becoming my wife, to help me raise the children. But it wasn't fair I hadn't been honest with you, and you didn't really know what you were agreeing to. Hannah nodded, remembering those early, uncertain days. That's true. But now, William continued, now you've been here for nearly a month. You've seen the worst of ranch life, the hard work, the isolation, the dangers. You've met the children, come to know them, and me. He took a deep breath. So I'm asking you again, Hannah, but this time with everything laid bare. Will you stay? Will you marry me? The question hung in the night air between them. Hannah thought of Emma's eager hugs, of James's tentative trust, of William's quiet strength. She thought of the life she had left behind in Boston, respectable but lonely, and the life she had found here in Montana, challenging but rich with purpose. Yes, she said simply. I will. William's exhale was audible, relief and joy mingled in the sound. He reached for her hand in the darkness, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I can't promise wealth or luxury, but I can promise that you'll never lack for love or respect in this house. Hannah's heart swelled at the simple sincerity of his words. Those are the only riches worth having, William. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, but Hannah met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deepening with shared emotion. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she leaned into his touch, feeling a sense of rightness that transcended her previous doubts and fears. When they finally broke apart, William rested his forehead against hers. I should have kissed you days ago, he murmured. Hannah laughed softly. We had a sick child to tend to, and you were being a gentleman. Too much of one, perhaps, he replied with a smile she could hear in his voice. I've wanted to kiss you since the moment you stood up to me about the children. When you showed more concern for their well-being than your own hurt feelings. That was when I first saw the real William Blackett, Hannah admitted. Not the man who wrote those careful letters, but the father who would do anything for his children. That man was worth getting to know better. They sat together on the porch for another hour, talking quietly of practical matters when they might marry, what changes would need to be made to the cabin, how to tell the children. But beneath these discussions ran a current of joy that needed no words. When Hannah finally retired to her room, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. She had come west seeking security and perhaps companionship. What she had found instead was something far more precious, a family to call her own. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the small community. Martha Peterson was the first to offer congratulations, arriving the very next day with a basket of preserves and practical advice about frontier marriage that made Hannah blush and William suddenly remember urgent tasks in the barn. The children's reactions were telling. Emma was ecstatic, dancing around the cabin and immediately beginning to call Hannah Mama until gently corrected. "Not yet, sweetheart," Hannah explained, kneeling to the child's level. "After the wedding, if that feels right to you, you can call me that. Until then, Hannah is just fine." James was more reserved, but Hannah caught the relief in his eyes when she assured him that nothing would change immediately. They would continue as they had been, getting to know each other better day by day. "And you'll still help me with my reading?" He asked, his first request of her that wasn't related to his immediate needs during recovery. "Of course," Hannah promised, touched by this evidence of his growing trust. "Every day, if you like." The wedding was planned for late August, after James was fully recovered and before the harvest began in earnest. It would be a simple affair at the small church in Silver Creek, followed by a celebration at the ranch. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, Hannah threw herself into preparations, not just for the wedding but for her permanent place in the Blackett household. With Martha's help, she sewed curtains for the windows and cushions for the chairs. She organized the pantry and root cellar, planning for the coming winter. William, seeing her enthusiasm, worked with equal vigor on the promised second bedroom. The storage room was cleared, the walls freshly plastered, and a window cut to allow sunlight to brighten the small space. He built a new bed for Emma with his own hands, carving flowers along the headboard that delighted the little girl. James, now recovered enough for light duties, often worked alongside his father, his quiet presence a constant reminder of how far they had come since Hannah's arrival. Though still reserved, he had begun to open up to her in small ways, sharing discoveries from his explorations of the ranch, asking for help with difficult words in his books, even occasionally offering a shy smile when pleased. The day before the wedding, Hannah was hanging the last of the laundered linens when she spotted James sitting alone on the corral fence, watching the horses graze. On impulse, she crossed the yard to join him, lifting her skirts slightly to climb up beside him on the rough-hewn rail. "Beautiful day," she commented, squinting into the late summer sunshine. James nodded, his legs swinging slightly. "Papa says it's good luck to have sunshine for a wedding. Does he? I hope he's right." Hannah studied the boy's profile, so like his father's in the strong jaw and straight nose. "Are you ready for tomorrow, James? It's a big change for all of us." James considered the question with his usual seriousness. "Emma's excited. She's been practicing walking down the aisle with her flowers." Hannah smiled, thinking of the little girl's determined rehearsals. "She'll be perfect." "But I asked about you, not Emma." James picked at a splinter on the fence rail. "I've been thinking about my mama, about what she would say about tomorrow." Hannah's heart constricted. This was delicate territory, but she knew it was important to be honest. "What do you think she would say?" James was quiet for so long that Hannah wasn't sure he would answer. Then, softly, "I think she'd be happy that Papa isn't lonely anymore, and that Emma has someone to do her hair and teach her girl things." He glanced at Hannah quickly, then away, "And maybe that I have someone to read with again." The simple assessment brought tears to Hannah's eyes. "I think you're right, James. From everything your father has told me about your mother, she loved you all very much and would want you to be happy." James nodded. Then, with the direct honesty of childhood, "I won't call you Mama." "Not yet, anyway." "I understand," Hannah assured him. "You can call me whatever feels right to you. There's no rush." James seemed relieved by this. "Papa says you're not trying to replace her, that you're adding to our family, not taking anything away." "Your father is a wise man," Hannah said softly. "That's exactly how I feel." James nodded again, apparently satisfied. After another moment of companionable silence, he hopped down from the fence. "I should go help Papa with the chairs for tomorrow. He's bringing them from town in the wagon." Hannah watched him go, her heart full. Tomorrow she would marry William Blackett and officially become part of this family. But in the ways that truly mattered, she already belonged to them and they to her. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, just as William had hoped. Hannah, dressed in the blue silk gown she had brought from Boston, her finest possession, saved for this very purpose. Martha helped her arrange her hair, weaving wildflowers into the dark tresses. "You look beautiful, my dear," the older woman said, stepping back to admire her work. "William won't know what hit him." Hannah blushed, studying her reflection in the small mirror. The woman who looked back at her seemed different from the one who had stepped off the stagecoach just over a month ago, her face more relaxed, her eyes brighter, her skin lightly tanned from days spent outdoors. The ride to town was a family affair, with Thomas driving the freshly polished wagon, James and Emma dressed in their Sunday best, and Hannah filled with a nervous excitement that made her fingers tremble as she smoothed her skirts. The church was simple but lovely, decorated with wildflowers and ribbon for the occasion. Hannah was touched to discover that nearly everyone in Silver Creek had turned out for the ceremony, a testament to the community's respect for William and their curiosity about the Eastern bride who had chosen to make her home among them. Even Miss Coleman was present, her expression studiously neutral as Hannah walked down the aisle on Judge Porter's arm, the older man having kindly offered to give her away in her father's absence. But Hannah barely noticed the assembled guests. Her eyes were fixed on William, waiting for her at the altar in a new suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. He watched her approach with such naked adoration that she felt her heart might burst. At his side stood James, solemn in his role as best man, and beside him, Emma practically vibrated with excitement, her wildflower crown slightly askew but her smile radiant. When Hannah reached them, William extended his hand. She placed her fingers in his, feeling the familiar calluses and the gentle strength of his grip. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his eyes never leaving her face. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. They exchanged simple vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through all of life's challenges. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, William's kiss was tender but conveyed a depth of emotion that brought fresh tears to Hannah's eyes. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. William Blackett, Hannah felt Emma slip a small hand into hers. She looked down to find the child beaming up at her, flower crown now completely lopsided. On her other side, James offered a rare, genuine smile that transformed his serious face into something luminous. The celebration at the ranch afterward was joyous and relaxed. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with dishes brought by neighbors' misses. Rivera's famous chicken, Martha's preserves, pies and cakes and hearty stews that spoke of the community's generosity. Lanterns hung from trees would illuminate the gathering as evening approached, and someone had brought a fiddle for dancing. As the afternoon progressed into evening, Hannah found moments to connect with each member of her new family. She danced with William, their bodies moving together with a new awareness of each other. She taught Emma a simple waltz, laughing as the little girl concentrated on counting steps. She sat quietly with James, accepting his gift of a carved wooden horse that he had made himself during his recovery. "It's beautiful," she told him, running her fingers over the smooth lines. "You have a real talent, James." He ducked his head at the praise, but she caught the pleased expression before he hit it. "Thunder was the model," he explained, referring to his beloved horse. I'll treasure it always, Hannah promised, carefully placing the carving in her pocket. As the celebration continued around them, William found Hannah sitting on the porch, taking a moment's respite from the festivities. He settled beside her, his shoulder brushing hers in a way that sent a pleasant warmth through her. "Happy?" he asked softly. Hannah looked out at the gathering, Emma dancing with Judge Porter, James deep in conversation with Thomas about some aspect of horse training, neighbors and friends enjoying each other's company as the sun began to set over the Montana landscape. "Very," she said truthfully. "Are you?" William's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. "More than I thought possible again." They sat in companionable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring a return to the routines of ranch life, chores and lessons, meals to prepare and mending to be done. But they would face it together as a family. "Hannah," William said after a while, his voice thoughtful, "what made you answer my advertisement? Out of all the opportunities you must have had in Boston, why choose an unknown future in Montana with a stranger?" Hannah considered the question. I was looking for purpose. After my parents died, after losing the shop, I felt adrift. Your letter spoke of building something, of hard work and honest living. It resonated with me." William nodded slowly. "And now, have you found what you were looking for?" Hannah turned to face him fully, taking in the features that had become so dear to her in such a short time, the clear blue eyes, the lines etched by sun and worry, the mouth that could soften so tenderly when he looked at his children. At her. "I've found more than I was looking for," she said softly. "I came seeking security and perhaps companionship, but I've found a home, William, a family, love." His expression softened at the word, and he leaned forward to kiss her gently. "I love you, Hannah Blackett," he murmured against her lips. "Thank you for taking a chance on us." The sound of running feet interrupted the moment as Emma bounded onto the porch. "Papa, Hannah, Thomas says we're going to have fireworks soon," William laughed, pulling his daughter onto his lap. "Does he now? Well, we'd better not miss that." Hannah smiled at the pair of them, then glanced up to see James approaching more slowly. Without hesitation, she extended her hand to him. After only a brief pause, he took it, allowing himself to be drawn closer to the family group. "Mrs. Rivera says there's cake now," he reported. "Chocolate." "Well then, we definitely shouldn't miss that," Hannah said with mock seriousness that coaxed another smile from the boy. As they rose to rejoin the celebration, Hannah felt a sense of completion, of rightness that transcended the uncertainties she had harbored upon her arrival. This place, these people, they were her home now. Her family. She had traveled west seeking a new beginning, and against all odds, she had found it in the most unexpected way through the love of a man who had once deceived her and the trust of children who had lost too much. Together, they would build something beautiful from the broken pieces of their past. As the first firework exploded overhead, painting the Montana sky with brief, brilliant color, Hannah looked at the faces illuminated beside her, William's strong profile, Emma's delighted expression, James's tentative smile, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Years later, Hannah would look back on that wedding day as the true beginning of her life in Montana. The challenges that followed, harsh winters, dry summers that threatened the crops, the normal trials of family life, were faced together, strengthening rather than weakening the bonds between them. Emma grew from an eager child into a confident young woman with her mother's creativity and her father's determination. James, once so wounded and withdrawn, found his voice and his purpose through his exceptional way with horses, eventually starting a breeding program that would make the Blackett Ranch known throughout the territory. And William and Hannah's love deepened with each passing season, tested by hardship but nurtured by shared joys. The birth of their son Robert, 2 years after their marriage, the expansion of the ranch, the quiet moments at day's end when they sat together on the porch, watching the Montana sunset. They were not a perfect family. They argued and reconciled, celebrated and mourned, faced challenges and savored triumphs. But through it all ran a thread of love and respect that had begun on that dusty summer day when a mail-order bride from Boston first laid eyes on the family that would become her own. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were grown and the house peaceful, William would remind Hannah of the moment she had first seen Emma and James, how tears had filled her eyes at the sight of the motherless children. "You've needed you all along," he would say, his voice soft with memory and gratitude. "All of us did, even before we knew it." And Hannah, thinking of the uncertain young woman who had stepped off that stage coach so long ago, would simply squeeze his hand in response. For she had needed them too, this family, this life, this love that had transformed her from a stranger into the heart of a home.